Wonder if we go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council work session to order, please. And we're going to go ahead and start with the roll call, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Lauer,
Here.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Milamwe,
Here.
Alderman Stern,
Here.
Alderman Painter,
Here.
Alderman Schmidt,
Here.
Alderman Black, Alderman Howman,
Here.
Alderman Fruin,
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you. We're going to start out with public comment, and we have one person, Jacob DeGiel. Jacob, would you come forward?
Hello.
Good evening.
My name is Jacob Dejo. I'm a resident at 303 East Front Street in downtown Bloomington. Did I start too
Sorry,
early?
I messed up your name there.
DeGiel? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
no problem. Everybody does. I'm used to it now. Like I said, I'm a resident at 303 East Front Street in downtown Bloomington, or what I have now affectionately begun to call it, the corner of Sharrow and Bike Lane. I'm also the creative operations manager at Illinois State University. I'm an avid bike commuter. I'm the co-founder and secretary of Bike Blono, our local bike advocacy group encouraging and promoting the bicycle for everyday transportation in Bloomington Normal. Our organization supports the funding for resurfacing and expanding of the Constitution Trail. We believe that the trail is not only a major recreational asset to the community, but is also an important transportation corridor for cyclists commuting to work, completing errands, and for any other reason somebody might typically drive a car if they don't own one or choose not to drive. Repaving and expanding the trail can also add to tourism and help lead to less wear and tear on the roads and less traffic congestion. In short, because the Constitution Trail is a critical aspect of the transportation network for a large and growing portion of our population, Bike Blono urges the council to fund its expansion and resurfacing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Moving right along, we're going to begin a discussion on that very topic, the Park Trail Grant. We've allocated approximately 20 minutes, and we're going to go ahead and begin that. Just as a quick backdrop, of course, this is the 2009 capital bill, where the law basically itself said that we had in our council packet in our last meeting that it said Bloomington, Illinois, Parks and Trails. And so it didn't say anything necessarily about being tied to a specific legislator or a particular caucus. So essentially at this point we are getting contradictory information from people in Springfield. I know that that's not a shock to many, but at this point what we're doing is in a sense our due diligence to say we did vote, the council did vote 8-0, no, that the particular project that was adjacent to Central Catholic in McGraw Park was not a priority. We were not accepting that, but what are our other priorities for parks and trails according to the law? And that's our due diligence, and that's the beginning of our discussion this evening. And so I wonder if we could, City Manager, if you want to weigh in before we begin.
Yes, Mayor, I just want to make the council aware we've got two items. First, on the work session, we're bringing to you, and we'll have Bobby Hirakovich in a minute, mention not only some recommended projects, which we feel follow some of your comments from the previous meeting about trying to take care of what we have, things that would be related to parks and trails, with the hope that maybe by the end of the work session discussion of these items, the council majority would be pretty much in agreement of what would be the projects you would want to recommend. And then we did amend the regular agenda so that the council could then entertain a motion to approve those projects, with the understanding that we have kind of two parties to submit this to: DCEO, who we've started discussions with and submitted other data, and then we are passing out for you that I think is, some of you have seen electronically, the letter from Senator Bill Brady about the committee that he is forming, and he's had the chair of Jesse Smart heading that up. And we think it also would be prudent to kind of share and recommend this body also concur with what you would like to see the money spent for. And then, as the mayor said, we're hearing contradictory information, hopefully one or the other or both or whoever. You know, ultimately what we want, and in order to ultimately in the future spend this money, we need a contract signed by Governor Quinn and approved by this council and signed by Mayor Renner that will allow us to proceed with the project. That's ultimately what we're seeking from the state. And so just wanted to provide that to you. At this point in time, we have Bobby Harakovich who'll come forward. Would you just kind of highlight your recommendations and so that we can begin some discussion with the council if they're in agreement or want to make any changes?
If we could
to
just
these projects.
clarify also that these are things that come from the Parks Master Plan, which comes from many years of people, our citizens actually participating in citizen engagement. And so that's, from that list, you're bringing some staff recommendations.
Correct. And thank you very much for having me up here this evening to talk to you about what I love best, Parks and Recreation and improving the quality of life for our residents. And that's what it's really about, is how we can best improve the lives of our residents. I've outlined several ideas for you to consider. $750,000 initially sounds like a lot of money, and then when you get down to looking at the needs list and the unmet needs that we have in the city, it goes very quickly. So I took your comments into consideration last time, looked at the comprehensive plan, looked at stormwater to see if we could do any improvements there with some of our parks, and came up with the following list. Number one was the Constitution Trail. We all know that, as we heard earlier, that it's an important part of the city of Bloomington, and it's used by 5,000 users a day, according to the statistics we've collected. So I think that anything we can do to enhance that trail is to the benefit of our residents. And again, it also takes people and bicycles and off the streets and provides an alternate transportation. The second one I had suggested is a little bit harder to swallow, probably, because it has the word golf in it. But I'd like to let you know that there are several lifelong sports. If you don't know this already, tennis, swimming, and golf are all considered lifelong sports. It's something you can take up as a child and continue until you're a senior. And so for that reason, we looked at what the course that is the most heavily used and is a revenue-producing course, and we know that we cannot continue to keep that revenue going forward without repairs to cart paths. We charge a pretty high price compared to other courses for the use of that course, and hence this would get a portion of the worst part of the cart path, and that was $250,000. The third item I suggested, and this was an observation I had just in coming as a newcomer to the community, we've got such a sophisticated system here in the community. You've done a lot for the residents. We've got a lot of different opportunities. And I looked at the West Side Park, known as Sunnyside Park, and I thought, ooh, what an opportunity here to be able to bring a community coalition together, bring the Boys and Girls Club, people that live in low-income housing, and put together a community build where everybody comes together, builds a playground, works on a renovation of that park. Right now, we have some Y programs that use the soccer fields, the open space there. We need to be sensitive to that because we want them to be there. But I think anything we can do to encourage positive use of that neighborhood park would be beneficial to the community. Those are the three I outlined. I was asked to look at others. In my opinion, Miller Park is the jewel of our community. It's an awesome park that's failing in infrastructure. Miller Park itself, the pavilion is rented constantly for weddings, etc. The roof leaks, the concrete's falling apart, the pillars need to be replaced, the terraces are no longer there. We've already removed one. There used to be a storage shed there, I believe, and that portion was removed. It needs a lot of concrete repair. We could probably spend easily $1 million on that Miller Park Pavilion itself if we put an elevator in as well. But it needs a lot of little things to make sure that that building stays historically accurate, and also the infrastructure is taken care of. And I'm kind of an infrastructure person. I like to look at that first before we get to the pretty parts of it, and I think that's a big issue. Miller Park itself, we know the roads, we know the curbs, there's a lot of things, playgrounds. I'm amazed at the little garage there that we use for performing arts. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a beautiful concert venue there? There's an opportunity for a lot of things to happen in Miller Park as we go forward, but I would urge you to consider spending the other dollars in Miller Park as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we're going to go ahead and begin for the council to weigh in. And who'd like to speak to this? Let's start out with Alderwoman Schmidt.
I wasn't
Fruin.
done, Mayor.
Uh,
I have one more.
I thought you said that's how you wanted to spend the rest of the money.
Oh,
Okay,
I said
I
that.
need
I
you to
would
be
urge
quick
you to
because
spend
we've actually...
the last one I simply would be the Lincoln Leisure Center. I think that it behooves us to start looking at that center in long range. It's got, it doesn't have central air. We can't have 104-degree heat indexes in the gymnasium and have day camps, et cetera. We actually have day camp at Central Catholic, and they allow us to use the cafeteria for free. So I think that we need to look at probably a geothermal answer there, probably when we replace the parking lot. So I just wanted to mention that as a long-term, not for tonight so much, but as a long-term, just to spark your imagination.
Okay, we have Alderwoman Schmidt, Fruin, and Lauer.
Okay, thank you very much for your work on this, and I certainly don't want to spend a lot of time second-guessing what's been in our master plan and what you and Parks and Rec have done. And I'm delighted to see Sunnyside in there. It really needs some help. Just a question I think is probably at least obvious to me regarding the Prairie Vista golf course. Why aren't we taking some of our revenue that comes into Prairie Vista and reinvesting it into the upkeep so that the people who are really using it are the people who are paying for it?
Well, we are. We recently replaced the HVAC system. It's just not enough to continue to do major infrastructure. I don't think golf courses anymore in the enterprise funds are being as quite as attractive as they used to be. Golf is down nationally. We've been advised to give it 5 years and and do everything that we can to make sure that our numbers maintain where they are and hopefully grow. So we're making little changes at all the courses, but Prairie Vista is the one that is the key one that is, it's an expensive fee, to be charged for basically poor cart paths.
Mayor, if I could just add, last year during budget time, I think we shared with you that going forward, the long-term plan would have to be realistic that operating revenues in the golf courses are covering operating expenses, but they are not sufficient, to really cover the capital needs, big capital needs in these golf courses, and probably will never reach there, especially because we still have to be competitive on golf fees, rental rates with other private golf courses. So I think that is the reality going forward with 3 golf courses. Operating revenue should cover operating expenses, but it'll probably never, in reality cover the big capital expenditures. And there is some coming up, not just these golf courts,
Right.
but others as well, that we'll have to look to the general fund or other sources to cover those costs.
Okay. Anything else, Alderwoman Schmidt? Alderman Fruin.
Thank you, Mayor. I can support what's presented here because I think, as was alluded to, I think that we can all redraw this. There's 12 or whatever that number that is that are very credible projects, so I can be supportive of this. A couple thoughts I have as I go through here. Number one, I'm not sure whether the Constitution Trail discussion is truly expansion or whether it's maintenance. Don't know that is a big concern.
Okay.
I also wonder about whether it could be done in conjunction with the town of Normal. And what I don't know is whether they have maybe a pending grant of some type that they're also looking at for their parks and recs. So I wonder if there's some working together here.
Hmm?
With regard to number 2, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had a $750,000 allocation to improving the cart paths in last year's budget, and I think it was removed by us as a council. I'm concerned about that declining because I think we have seen, most people would say in the community, that we have made significant improvements to Illinois State D.A. Wybring Golf Course and to the Ironwood Golf Course by the town of Normal. I'm concerned that if we let ours decline, that competition will go to other community availability golf courses. And number 3, I'm very supportive of that. And in conclusion, I would ask this question. Again, I want to backtrack to say I can support this as presented to us. I'm not sure how this all plays out with the mayor and Senator Brady and Springfield, but I just asked the question, would we be better off with one capital project, whether that's Constitution Trail or whatever it is, versus this three-part proposal that does include maintenance items? I just asked that question. Thank you.
You wanna weigh in, Bobby?
Well, it's a good point. I appreciate, we debated that ourselves and thought, thought a little bit about, we have so many different wards here and we're representing all of our constituents and what is politically appropriate according to our needs. We looked at Miller Park itself and thought, we've got $1 million we could spend just on the roads in Miller Park, yet the timing of the zoo expansion will prevent us from doing that completely. I believe Alderman Sage asked me to look at stormwater improvements. That needs to be engineered at Miller Park. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Lauer. That needs to be engineered at Miller Park, and we need to probably put funds in this year's budget to do that as a study first. I think we need to do some planning, spend some money on planning, and then move forward. As far as one project at 750, we could do the golf course. We could do Miller Park. Boy, 750,000, I could build you one heck of a park, too.
Okay, no, I'm just asking to respond to that. I need to, Alderman Lauer.
Let me, Bobby, thank you so much for doing all that you have here, and I'm glad that you've done that. However, I had several conversations with Senator Brady himself this week. I had not really broached the subject with him, even though we're well acquainted. I kind of let him take the lead on that. I ran into him at another function, and then we had a follow-up discussion that led to almost 2 hours of discussion yesterday afternoon. There is a misconception that this money would be spent on a park. It was originally slated for a park due to the fact that historically that was decided upon during Steve Stockton's administration back in about 2008-2009 timeline. That money was slated for that particular park until we voted it down. That was inside the current, the past district that Mr. Brady represented. Due to the fact that we have voted that down, he checked with his ethics officer in terms of the Republican caucus. It was put on hold as a standard procedure, and now that has taken place, it must be spent inside the new district. That does not, however, coincide with all of the city of Bloomington, unfortunately. So that does limit geographically what some of these possibilities are legally. And that's of no choice of ours, and it's really no choice
Just as a
of the
correction,
state.
legally that's not. He was what he's saying, it may be the political practice in Springfield, but legally the law clearly states Bloomington, Illinois, Parks and Trails,
Enhanced,
period. There's
Uh,
no stipulation. It has to be the
Okay, well,
44 states in district.
you can argue with the attorney himself then, I guess,
Right.
if you'd like to,
Right.
but he
Yeah.
told me under no certain terms that this would probably most likely be spent on a brick and mortar type fundamental need, and would not be, they would not even be looking at a golf course, under no certain circumstances.
Well, at
There are
this
many
point,
other
what
needs that we
working with,
discussed.
we're working with the law, which, and not somebody's, a politician's interpretation, says trails,
He's not just a
the law.
politician, sir, he is an attorney.
Well, we've had attorneys tell us the same thing too, but just literally it says Bloomington, Illinois, Parks and Trails, period, nothing else. And so at this point, this is all academic. What are our priorities, period? And then we move forward, since we're told many different stories.
As I was trying to get to, this may not really be our decision as a council.
Correct.
Okay, we can make recommendations.
That's
But
correct. We're making a
it would appear,
recommendation.
and as I have the understanding, the committee will be trying to make those recommendations, but it will be the caucus that actually approves where the money is spent. Okay? And so we can make recommendations, but it has to be within that geographical boundary of his representative area, and it will most likely be spent on a more fundamental need, and one of the things that he discussed with me was the Connect Transit building, possibly on the south side of downtown, yet it would lie in the geographical area. There are a number of other areas that, obviously on the south side of town, we have a number of areas that need help. And one of the things that he and I mentioned is streets and infrastructure that we have been putting off for some time. So I don't know whether it would be a drop in the bucket for the Bunn and Hamilton extension, but that might be someplace. Lafayette Street and several others might come into play there as well. One of the things that he did stress is that he expected that the caucus would decide to attempt to try to create some jobs and stimulate the local economy as an offset here. So those are all good things. It just may not play into what we had currently thought it might.
Okay. Alderman Sage.
Bobby, and first of all, again, thanks, because I know we've got a convergence of a lot of different dynamics here, and I appreciate the number of plates you're trying to keep spinning here all at once. Follow up on Jim's question in terms of the maintenance. It says maintenance and or expansion of Constitution Trail.
And I
Can
did
you, in a
mention
more detailed manner, kind of highlight what that is?
I have Route 66 trail normal to Towanda, construction first half, 75,000. Towanda North, 2.4 miles. Design of the trail Shirley South. These are things that we're looking for future funding for, as well as the connections that I had mentioned in the original.
That sounds like a whole lot more expansion than maintenance.
And resurfacing a very large portion of what we have. Let me pull that out for you. I didn't answer that well, I apologize.
So give me some idea of the 300,000. What is the split between resurfacing or maintaining what we have versus expansion?
I would say the majority is going to resurfacing.
200,000?
More than 200,000, yes.
Okay. In terms of the golf course, and I left you a voicemail this morning saying I had some concerns about that, and here's why. Because we have still fundamentally kind of an unanswered question about how we're going to approach golf courses, and that is that we've tried to, at least the time I've been here, convert that to an enterprise fund, hopefully as a way to reduce the revenue to cover both the operational and maintenance / capital expenses. If that's, or I should say, since that's not going to happen, then perhaps it's time for us to revisit the reality of whether or not the city needs to be in the golf course business before we start to put $250,000 into cart paths. That's something that we've touched on over the last couple of years. I think it's something that we know as a council we need to revisit. When I, again, think about what I imagine was the intended use of the grant, which is parks and trails, for me personally, I don't see golf cart paths in there. I see playgrounds like Sunnyside, Constitution Trail, maybe other playground equipment. Again, let me say again, I understand kind of the time constraints and the ability to be able to capture and identify realistic quotes and get things out for bid.
Correct.
That type of thing.
Correct.
I'm not indifferent to that. But I think at least I believe there'd be a lot of questions, or I know I would get some questions from folks in my ward as to, why that wasn't put into parks and trails versus repairing a golf cart path. So again, I'd be supportive of 1 and 3. Two, I would not be able to support. So.
And I did have the resurfacing, sir, of, for example, Hershey Road to Airport Road, Stride Drive to Longford. Those were areas that were very much in need of resurfacing.
All right. We're going to need to move on very quickly here. Again, just to make it clear to the audience, this is a discussion. The actual action will come at our regularly scheduled meeting at 7 o'clock. And I believe I have Alderman Howman and Black, and I do need to be as quick as possible, please. Thank you.
Bobby, thanks for this information. It was helpful for me, anyway. The Hershey to Airport, is that the Liberty branch on the Constitution Trail?
I can't answer that for you, sorry, I'm not.
If it is, that was resurfaced this summer.
Okay.
I walked that the morning, it runs
Okay, well,
behind
one
you.
of the things, we can find out those answers
Anyway,
in
but,
time for the
but that
vote,
would,
yeah.
that would influence a decision, and,
Sure.
and I'm with David on the.
And I just said they
on
had,
the golf
for
course.
example, so
Yeah,
I think
okay.
we would take the worst parts and repair those.
Okay, I guess I didn't understand the, how this was put together. So when it says estimated completion date, these are these in priority?
The estimated completion date was put in there just as, I wanted you to see how we came to our conclusions. Our conclusion was, our priorities were, do we own it? Can we accomplish it within 2 years, which is typically the life of an appropriation grant?
And what about the cricket? We've talked about having a
Cricket field,
a cricket
right.
field.
I think here it was
Have a
because of the
cricket
time.
field. We have a cricket field, and we've got to work on getting more people out there because it's not used very much.
Ah,
Okay?
okay. I did not know
We
that.
have a cricket field
Yes,
that's
we do.
workable?
And I can't even tell you which park it is in, but we do have.
It's in the Pepper Ridge.
Yeah, Pepper Ridge.
Oh, but is it a Bloomington Park, or isn't it Unit 5?
No, it's a city of Bloomington.
It's the city of Bloomington.
Ah,
Okay,
okay,
all right.
thank you. I
Sure.
didn't know that.
And Alderman Black, Stearns and Maboka, we have to be very quick because we're gonna.
Everybody wants it on it, yeah. First of all, thank you so much. My patience is worn incredibly thin with this money, which, seems to be in this, I don't know, nebulous zone where, who knows who has it and who can get a hold of it. And this is the kind of stuff that drives me up the wall, just crazy, because we're wasting our staff time trying to get something together, and then we spend, how long at this point? I'm done with it. But here's my feedback if we have it. Number one, I don't know about this committee situation. I don't know who's going to be on it, what cronies they are. We're the aldermen. We're the ones that should be making a decision for where this money goes. To me, I have no appetite for the golf cart paths at all. I understand how the enterprise fund works and how we don't have the money for capital improvements. Not my cup of tea. I think that it should be entirely towards the Constitution Trail as much as we can towards resurfacing, if not mild expansion. Sunnyside Park definitely on top of my list as well. I've had people call me up about that park and some of the horrific conditions
Right.
of the basketball court. So that's my feedback. I really hope we don't spend any more staff time on this, because if it truly is the case where some political caucus can hold up this money for the citizens, that's ridiculous. So my feedback.
Alderwoman Stearns and then Maboka.
Thank you, Bobby. And I truly do agree on the time. A tremendous amount of time has been and is being spent, and our citizens are being led down a path that I'm not at all sure is a viable one. I do believe from people I've spoken with in Springfield that Senator Brady certainly has some major direction on this, and I'm not at all sure that any of this is going to be workable. In fact, I'd like to know if there's a deadline or a timeline on when we will know. But I'm with Alderman Black on the amount of time we've spent on this, and also the engagement of our citizens, which I think they deserve, answers, real answers. But that being the case, we've been talking about golf since the day I joined City Council 8 years ago, almost 8. We've been talking about it ever since then, whether Highland course, could continue, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what the usage is, Prairie Vista versus the Den. Is Prairie Vista much heavier?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Why we haven't, prioritized and kind of settled on a really realistic golf vision, I don't know. I know other cities are closing golf courses, sadly, but it's reality. We have to look at national trends, and I don't think we're doing that. So I'm not a big fan of the golf either, simply because we've not really designed and prioritized, which is unfortunate. I'd love to see the Sunnyside Park, especially if there's no playground, or there's not a good playground. That to me seems like a no-brainer. And I guess an infrastructure, certainly, absolutely, that benefits the entire public. These are public funds. Let's let the people from whence it came benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Milwamboy.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this gets more confusing every day.
Right.
But hopefully we'll find a solution to this. I personally, I think I'm more in favor of the Constitution Trail resurfacing, for example, and trying to fix the things that we have that are not working so well. I've been on the trail a number of times, and I could see that the pavement needs a little bit of resurfacing. And I also with that, I mean, as was said, earlier, the Constitution Trail serves many purposes, whether it's recreation or transportation. But at the same time, I think we also have to be cautious about expansion because that also means more expenses, right? So that's something that I think we have to be a little bit cautious about. But it does serve quite a few people, and I think if we get into this, I know people will have a tendency to compare, why didn't I get the park stuff, in my area? And at this point, I could say the same thing. Well, I should have just, had it in my ward, but I think the Constitution Trail, I think, will accomplish the goal of serving the many areas of the city and has the potential of making most people happy, not everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Bobby. Again, we may be asking you to run some numbers as we get to the point where we're establishing our priorities as elected officials for this in the actual regular city council meeting. So we are well behind in our time, so it's going to be really tight. Solid waste funding finances. If we could have Jim come up and...
Mayor, let me, as he gets ready, just make a few comments. As during the council fall retreat, I did share with you that one of the fees that I would ask that you give serious consideration to adjusting is that of solid waste fees. As you know, solid waste is in an enterprise fund, and last year, based on projections, we made, I think, some good decisions the council did on what fees needed to be. But as you'll see tonight, the reality has been something different. I also just put in here, too, information on the City Council approved fund balance policy. And I think that's something we all need to think about because as this, as well as some other funds that we'll talk about in the future, stormwater and others, I think it's important that we just look for the opportunities to share with you where these priorly approved policies should require us to be. And as we find is starting to deviate from those, we want to make you aware. So at least it's something for you to take in consideration as we make recommendations for revenue adjustments or expenditures adjustments as well. So with that, the intent tonight is to give you a good update. I appreciate many staff members, the Assistant City Manager, Public Works Director, Finance Director, and others who have been involved trying to update a lot of this cost data. So with that, are you about ready, Jim?
We will be flexible and go with the fly. First, I think the Assistant City Manager, Steve Rasmussen, is going to be handing out copies of the presentation to you so that while I try to pull this up, he's going to be handing it out to you as well.
I could add, what we've done is we've updated just a couple of slides, and so this is a clean packet, which is most up to date to you. And Jim has said he will go through these quickly and just highlight the most important ones for you.
Let's take it out. Perfect. Well, thank you, City Manager. Mayor and City Council, while this is pulling up, I guess what's important is we are going to try to go back and revisit some things. As a city, we do a lot of different studies. We do a lot of different, put a lot of effort towards some different projects, but many times we don't revisit that for you. It's important for us to come back, provide updates for you, to let you know how the different projects are going. So I'll try to quickly get through some context and then get you to some updated numbers. So right now, you'll see under this first page, it's always important to remind you of all the different services that our solid waste division provides. But in addition to some of the things that we often don't think about, those same employees who do the alley maintenance drop-off center, leaf collection right now, which is really hot and heavy, they also do snow removal. So those are the same people who plow our streets. So what happened? Back in 2009, we had a recession. So the City Council, they went through and they adopted an enterprise fund policy. They set actually the solid waste fund as an enterprise fund. And so out of that, it's important, as the city manager pointed out, the goal of that was to be able to have that fee pay for itself, that fund to be able to pay for itself, and then also have 10% of its funds as an annual revenue on the side to be able to help deal with operating expenses. We're not there yet, but that's what the goal the council has set for this fund. We went through an exhaustive study. As you know, it was 18 months, 24 months, and that kind of time frame. It dealt with online, written surveys, public meetings. I mean, there was extensive reports. All of this is online for your perusal, but a lot of work went into that. So what happened out of that? The council passed a rate increase, a tiered system that tried to promote, that kind of had people pay for what they put out. If you had a 95-gallon container, you paid more for it. 16-gallon container stayed at the same price that it was at already. And so it was a 3-year increase to try to get the goal the council had set at that time was they wanted it to be self-supporting in 3 years. So what we as a staff are bringing back to you is kind of an update. But in addition to that, you also looked at trying to do some cost-cutting, efficiency. You went toward automation, recycling, garbage collection. You put recycling as the cornerstone of the operation. You implemented low-income discounts for residents. You had the Bloomington Housing Authority assessed at a lower rate because of how it's collected. But then the other things were we had the bulk waste. We went down to 1 bucket for no charge, an additional collection, but there's no fees for brush, leaf collection, things like that. So let's get down to the meat of it. I tried to get through some of that context so we could talk about an update on numbers. My thanks to the Finance Department, Patty Lynn and her crew, Carla Murillo, and then also Laura Hughes, a new accountant that helped a lot on this. So up in front of you, we're thankful Steve Arney helped provide this kind of highlight for you of some of the numbers provided by Finance. So if I can, look at some of this projected information. We provided some updated numbers from what was originally given to you. Here's the revenue. The revenue right now is $5.474 million. Originally, in the revised budget, it was $6.149. Now, the total refuse expenses were $7.8 million. There's a shortfall of $2.3 million. The subsidy that was intended under the current budget was almost $1.2 million. So what that does is that leaves us with a shortfall that is unaccounted for in the current budget. Now that's important. $1.1 million, that's a lot of funds that were not accounted for in the current budget with the solid waste fee. And in addition, it's important to point out that this does not include any of that 10% for that, the $771,000 for kind of that additional contingency fund. So if we look at the 5-year forecast, as well, we wanted to point out a couple key things that we're seeing as part of this program. We're seeing that the overall revenue is not coming in as was originally projected. It actually is coming in significantly lower. If you look in the out years, 2.4 million, 2.6 million. As you get out further, the numbers become more hazy. But as a staff, we thought it was critical to come back to you. Once the program became implemented, May 1st of 2014, when we went live with the automated garbage and all those things, it didn't roll out as was originally projected. So the question is, why were the projections so far off? The rate study was completed in the fall of 2013 by Raftillis Financial Consultants. We actually had a professional outside financial firm come up with some of these projections that were used. Here's a key thing. They based some of the original projections off a 2-cart system. The council on the floor that was responsive to some citizen concerns about a smaller cart size, so we went with a 3-cart decision. And I'll show you some numbers moving forward. But a lot of that really impacted the revenue because the 35-gallon had no rate increase at all. And whenever you look at that, if we looked at the overall cost for citizens is about $27 if you had a full cost. A lot of times the council asks, what's the full cost? If you lumped everything in there and put it all in there, cost per month per resident, it's $27. Well, if we look at that smaller cart, that 35-gallon cart, it's only paying 60% of that overall fee. So that isn't going to capture that overall cost. But then also, our bulk is it's a great program, a very high service level, but it's one of our most expensive costs. Let's look at some of the differences we see. With our 35-gallon, the projections from Raftillis came in at 2,000 carts with the 65 at 8 and the 95 at 15,000. Well, the reality is people chose the smaller cart. People, like 3,900 more people chose the smaller cart than was originally anticipated. Well, that's a lot less revenue than was originally projected in the budget. In addition, there were quite a few trailer parks that dropped out. They said, we're going to go ahead and back out of the system at this point. So they said they left the system. We had about 1,300 units from mobile home parks. Well, between the two of those different things, the revenues came in less than was budgeted for. Then let's talk about bulk. Again, we've talked about this throughout the solid waste analysis, but we continue to see that overall high cost for that Cadillac excellent service that we have. In the report that was provided, you can see we actually have a chart we pulled out of that final solid waste analysis report. And again, about 60% varies between as you look at the bulk waste, but whenever you throw brush and leaves in there, that's the overall cost for what we provide. That amount of the service is brush, bulk waste. It's a large percentage. But even if we look at the tonnage, the overall tonnage is about 40%. So again, 60% of the labor, 40% of the tonnage. That's the overall for the bulk. So again, one of the things we're going to be talking about is bulk continues to be that very high level, high cost for us as a city. And we don't charge for that first bucket. We charge $25 for the second bucket. If we run this out by a tonnage basis, my thanks to the finance department, they ran some numbers and came up with a rough cost of about $100 per bucket. So $100 per bucket load is the actual cost of what it is for us to be able to collect that. So, options are what do we do with those overall costs for bulky waste? If people are putting that out, do you continue that philosophy? Those are choices. Does that what people pay whenever they put more out? Those are decisions the council has to look at. So let's talk about options. What staff is actually looking for tonight, our goal was to just do a presentation, an update to our city council, and then to allow you to have more dialogue moving forward. What direction would you like to provide for staff? We have multiple options. We can continue just as we're doing. We can subsidize out of the general fund. We can fast forward phased in increases. We can look at bulk waste changes. We can do a combination. But again, tonight we just wanted to present you with an update and then just to allow for some dialogue and see where you'd like staff to go next with this. Thank you.
Okay. If you'd stay here while we go through this, we are definitely pressed for time, but we want council input or questions, starting with Alderman Sage.
I guess probably one question, Jim. So we know our actual cost is about $27 per month. If the city wasn't providing that, because I think sometimes in these kinds of conversations it can be useful to provide kind of a larger context here. Do we have any idea what a household would be paying if a private firm was providing the same level of service that we provide right now? And I understand it's going to be very high level, and we haven't gone through any kind of due diligence to find that number. But do we have some type of a credible sense of what that would be?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question that's tough to answer. As to that solid waste analysis, we looked at 9 other comparable communities. And one of the difficulties is not many people provide the high level of service that Bloomington provides. As we look even into some of the Chicago suburbs, there are communities that pay a lot more than we do for private service, but there are other ones that pay less than us, but they provide a lot less service than us. So the good question, the answer is I don't know because nobody does it exactly like we do, but it's a good comparable answer.
Okay. Then the second question would be, and you've already alluded to it nicely, and that is, in conjunction with any conversation about raising fees, we ought to have another, I think, probably a much more robust conversation about the change in our level of service delivery as a way to reduce our cost rather than just looking at raising fees to cover the current cost. And if the folks in our city say, you know what, we want to be able to put, branches out at no charge, then we understand that there's going to be cost associated with that. So I hope we can have some kind of two-part conversation, not only about increased fees, but adjustments in service level to reduce our cost of operation.
Thank you, Alderman Sage. If I can, for the council, all of this is a policy level decision. We've talked about this before. So much of it, the service level that's set is by the council. Every community is different. What does the community want? And then how is that paid for? Is it a lump sum? Is it just you charge everybody $27? Do you pay for what you put out? How do you pay for that? So many communities, everybody does it differently. You know this, but it's good to revisit it.
In order, then we have Alderwoman Schmidt.
Yes, a question I think either for you, Mayor, or David. When we first implemented the new cart system, we made a commitment, I believe, to our citizens that we would revisit this once we got some experience under our belt, and maybe this is a really good time to seek some citizen input. What's working, what's not working,
Right. No, I
The
think that
question
that's,
that
I think
Alderman
that's
Sage
absolutely
just
right.
asked,
I
you
think,
know,
I
so
think
if we
what he's
could do that.
asking and what you're asking is
Yeah,
a very good idea. This
with
is
a
the next
qu-
point of engagement.
with
I
a
think.
pretty quick turnaround time.
Right,
I
right.
certainly know people continue to say to me, hey, when you get that task force going, I want to be on it, so.
Cool. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Hales?
Just that I think this is a great topic for a citizen, ad hoc committee as well as maybe even a survey question. And keep in mind, going back to that report, we did have both, I think, an ad hoc committee, some survey, so we can refresh that. But I think now that we have the reality and we do know, uh, what has become of our earlier projections, pulling an ad hoc committee could be a great way to kind of give the council some representative across the city input on what should be done. What are the options and what might they recommend for your consideration?
Okay. Again, keeping in mind we have one other topic area, so if we've got several people want to speak. Alderman Lauer, Fruin, Stearns, and Maboka.
I'm going to keep it real short, Jim. Differentiate for me, again, the break even here in terms of what the bulk waste costs out of that $27 that we're assuming is the full cost of everything combined. Okay? Break that out separately from the actual container pickup on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. It is difficult to do, but if you want generalities, what I will say is bulk waste, if you say it's 60% of the cost, that's about $16 of the overall cost goes toward bulk collection. And that is from a labor standpoint. How many, what our labor force is dedicated to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Fruin and Stearns and Maboka.
Thank you. Question and comment. I don't know if the answer is tonight, but I think the question in the community at large is, I think it was published a couple, 3 weeks ago, is Normal published their cost per household. So the question in the community is, why are we so much higher than the town of Normal? So if there's a different level of service or whatever the case might be, I think that's an answer that the community is interested in. Second part of that is I've stated before, my one opinion is as we begin to look at this again, I really favor the standard amount and not to differentiate. I think the differentiation just divides people. And I think when you look at the mechanical pickup of the cart, it's the same process, whether it's size A, B, or C. And I know we can debate that and have debated that in the past, but I'm a favor of avoiding the differentiation.
If I can, it's important to note these changes are going to continue to occur. Whenever we do a rate increase, our staff fully expects more people to make a shift.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic. I think it's very important to say whenever we do a next rate increase May 1st, there's going to be more people that will say, oh, it doesn't cost me to downsize my card. It does cost me to upsize my card. That was another thing that was implemented. So I think we're going to see more people shifting it. And it's been very difficult. We have our supervisors here, and we talked about that. That administrative level to daily deliver carts, it has not stopped. They're daily delivering recycle, garbage carts, shifting them. It is, and the burden of the different tiered system has been, as we said during the analysis, it has been
I'm going to have to move forward here. Alderwoman Stearns.
Mayor, can I just quickly answer the other question? Normal does much more heavily subsidize their solid waste program, more so than what we do. Also, they do just have 2 carts as opposed to 1. They do have some little variations, and I won't get into specifics, but watch, because what we are hearing, at least on the normal staff level, they are considering, at least on some staff recommendations, to increase their solid waste fees. Unfortunately, I think they're finding what we are too. It is a very expensive program because they do provide a lot of the same Cadillac services we do, and so they're having some tough times as well.
Okay. Again, Alderwoman Stearns.
Thank you. Thank you. What is our diversion rate now? Recycle diversion?
We actually, I think the better way I can answer that off the top of my head is we actually have a 76% participation rate with our recycling. We went from a 42% participation rate to a 76 participation rate.
Right.
It's
And
excellent.
that's great, but apparently recycle prices are not helping us. Apparently, is that, I'm not in the industry, I don't know.
No,
Okay.
you are correct. Actually, recycling prices, the revenue we're receiving from it, but it does, every ton you keep from going to landfill
Mhm.
saves us money. But no, we don't get, a ton of money from just
And I think the
recycling.
recycle prices are fluctuating, and they're probably down.
They always have, they always
Okay.
will,
All
yes.
right, thank you. And I just want to comment on the cost of bulky waste. And we've commented at a recent council member meeting, I think someone said, why do we see all this junk on our streets? In some of our, neighborhoods that are more challenged, certainly mine. And I think one of the reasons we see that is because the city of Bloomington allows it just to a point and makes it affordable to a point. And I'm a big proponent of charge for that. Now, the first bucket is free. The second bucket is $25. Okay. This is the most basic service, waste, that one of the most basic that a city provides. I don't know that council has ever said, I have never said, I want this 100% paid for by the citizens. I've never said that. I don't know where that comes from. We subsidize parks, public safety, lots of things, and I don't know why we can't subsidize this to some extent too. However, the bulky waste is a detriment in our neighborhoods. It's very unsightly. It adds to I frankly, I think it hurts the property values. And I do believe people are willing to pay for it. Now, I think it's a great service, and I think the guys do a fabulous job. But I absolutely think people need to pay for this. And I'm a big proponent of that. Not the single, working poor, single mothers, elderly on fixed incomes to pay more and more and more for their garbage, because I simply think they are maxed. Thank you.
And I'm sorry if I can't, it was a council decision to be an enterprise fund, not a staff decision. So that can be changed.
Right, but I'm
by
not saying it
council.
shouldn't be an
Talking about the
enterprise
subsidy,
fund.
and again,
I'm
we do
just
need to
saying
move
it can be
forward. Yeah.
subsidized to some extent.
Alderman Wamboy, and then Black, very quickly.
Okay, just very briefly, I think with the decreased service level, I mean, you'd see some negative consequences, I'm assuming, to some extent. So that's something that we'd have to have a conversation about and be prepared to deal with, such as bulky waste. I also, in looking at the bulky waste, I'm curious if you've seen the experience changed, because we made some changes, and do we have the same kinds of heavy users of the system, as opposed to last year?
Very briefly, we are seeing trending down with our overall amount of tonnage of bulky waste at the curb.
Alderman Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jim. So when this was first brought up, I took a lot of phone calls about it, mostly about bulk waste and why people didn't want to get rid of it. But now that we've seen some of the costs, I think some of those same folks would say, I'm uncomfortable with some of the costs that go along with this program. I'm not very amenable to fee increases, especially since we at this point are essentially subsidizing landlords in their bulk waste pickup, and you see it every semester. At the end of the semester, there's just a bunch of trash that's laying out there. I'd be in favor of some service cuts in terms of bulky waste. In order to help stem that flow. Additionally, I think that when it comes to fees, I'd be more open to talking about kind of zones, because the cost to send a truck out to the far side of town versus one near the core of the city is significantly different. If we're talking about one block that has 5 houses on it versus one block that has 10 houses on it, the cost for that is different. And so if we're going to keep considering that as trying to get this as close to an enterprise fund as possible, that should be something that we consider moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Obviously, a very spirited discussion, and stay tuned. We are moving on and have to do this very quickly. Proposed procurement ordinance, and we have 20 minutes designated, and that brings us just up to about where we're supposed to start our regular meeting. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Hales.
Mayor and council, tonight what we wanted to do is introduce you to a proposed amendment of our city procurement policy. And I do want to acknowledge the fact that we've not only had the finance department, Patty Lynn Silva, John Johnson, as well as our legal staff, Jeff Jurgens, who have been spending a great deal of time together with many representatives from our departments. This is not just a simple amendment. The proposal here is a major updating and rewriting of our procurement policies. We've had a couple of goals. We're trying to maintain efficiency, and be able to allow for the procurement of goods and services at the best value, but also we have to institute certain internal controls to help make sure and to allow for great competition, because we have many vendors who would like to participate on those. So tonight, we're giving you this draft document, going to turn over to, it looks like John Johnson, our purchasing manager, who I just want the council and the staff to know has done a phenomenal job as our purchasing manager. I think we have made just great leaps and bounds in the procurement process, including having monthly meetings with employees from many of the departments to find out what's working, what's not working, what can we do to improve the process. So appreciate all that John's been doing on this. So John, turn to you for maybe a few highlights on this proposed ordinance rewrite.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep it brief and keep things moving. I started working on this when I arrived in July last year. It had started back in 2010, and the whole change is something that is done ought to be done on a regular basis, and I think the city is correct in doing this. We're looking at making changes in efficiency, making things more cost effective. We're not going after this like something is wrong, we've got to fix it. The answer is we've got to make changes because legislation changes, economy changes, time moves on, and we need to keep moving and keep sharpening our pencil. One of the things that we're looking at is the reason why we're doing this. When the city had adopted the code many years ago where it required bids, sealed bids, for anything over $10,000, that was a state limit. For any community that was non-home rule, you had a limit of $10,000. That got raised to $20,000 7-8 years ago. In that particular case, the city hasn't kept up, so now it's time to make some changes. We've been working with this with a staff of 2, myself and Misty Schaefer. We are dedicated to the oversight of citywide procurement. During FY 2014, there were approximately 30,000 transactions that the city made at about $75 million. The procurement staff deals with costs from about $20 to $2 million on any given day. We may purchase things for the BCPA like clown noses. We may purchase chemicals for treating drinking water, or for building sewers, or for building streets, and everything in between. I've got 2 people here who will testify to how I brutalize these guys on a regular basis and how what we do in procurement affects their jobs in public service and public safety. So I'm going to try to keep this short. We do act as an active internal control. We do strive to provide open and transparent competition and comply with all applicable laws and regulation, and those are many. We do review procedures from time to time and do make changes. We use inputs from vendors because their input does matter. There has been a change in city management. We use input from city staff. As City Manager Hales mentioned, for about the last year and a couple of months, we've met on a regular basis, and we open up our meetings to anyone from any department who deals with anything in procurement. They have positive, they have negative, they ask questions, they provide answers, and they talk among themselves to help each other do better. The things that did come out across the board, whether it was from internal or external, is the bid limits are too low. It's too expensive to prepare bids for small vendors. They want to participate, but it takes money and time that they don't necessarily have and would like to participate in city business. We have an ineffective use of staff hours and expertise. We would like to sharpen our pencil and put more stress, more time where the greater need is. There are some areas where there's unclear authority for guidelines and procedures on what do we do next. And again, we'll have the interim fire chief and assistant police chief help explain the horrible things I make them do. What have we done in our review and analysis? We've looked at the code. We're looking for making it clearer. We're trying to eliminate confusion. Some of the language is outdated and just simply needs to be changed. Again, not that it's wrong or bad, but it's time to change and get current. The city's bid limit is too low. The quote limits are too low. The economy has changed. What might have been able to be quoted 5 years ago, if it needs to be replaced today, you might need to go out and get a bid for. We need to reallocate staff time to make better use of time. There's going to be a requirement for more accountability for construction projects, more oversight. And the Corporation Council will become more active in reviewing contracts. We want to work smarter. We want to work faster. We want to be more efficient. In short, the recommendations provided in the information in the ordinance is that the city manager will execute contracts after the council has authorized them. The bid limit would be raised from $10,000 to $25,000. Again, a community like the village of Wapella has a bid limit of $20,000 before they require bids. We have a very qualified staff, and ours is 10. The city manager can provide authorized procurements for up to $50,000 if the proper bidding or request for proposal process is followed. The city manager, in conjunction with the finance department, will establish and revise regulations for individual policies on procurement. The city manager can sign employment contracts or contracts with employment agencies and tax repayment agreements. The bid waiver resolutions are not required for joint purchases like the police cars or fire equipment, sole source or limited source, or certain professional services or emergency procurements. The city manager would have authority to waive bidding and direct payments for routine purchases like utilities, health insurance premiums, regulatory permits. You can't bid an EPA permit. City manager would have authority to procure necessary and compatible software, public safety equipment, services, commodities, etc., that make financial sense and reduce inefficiencies. In conclusion, vendors and city staff alike have worked together and have provided a lot of great input. I've got about 8 inches of paper on my desk on this matter. Existing standards have been reviewed and evaluated. We've measured the city's work against the work of other communities in the state and out of the state. We're trying to follow industry standards with NIGP. We've offered numerous recommendations and have been crafting these for a year now. Actually, for longer than a year, since it started before I arrived. Our recommendations represent efforts to make city operations more efficient and cost-effective. If I could take just a couple minutes of our time.
Actually, we don't have too much more. We're going to have to, because we have to, another meeting, a regular meeting starts in 13 minutes, but very quickly. And we want to have time for council questions too, please.
I would just have to say, someone said we spend nickels to save pennies, and I can tell you the staff that I devote to some of these requirements to fulfill the bidding process, and the time it takes, up to 2 months sometimes, to get bids back, I just think could be used much more effectively, and I don't think these changes are so drastic to have a concerned impact that might be going through you, because ultimately you're going to, most of the time, approve our request because I'm going to be able to show that it's something we actually need when it reaches the criteria we have, and if it don't, ultimately, I think the wisdom that be that would look over the higher amounts would intervene, as they already do on some existing procurements that don't even meet the existing standards.
Yeah, and I've got to echo what John was saying about the limits. You know, recently I turned a procurement memo in for our EMS contract, which is budgeted item. It's $17,000. I turned it in as a procurement memo. Spent time to write it, sent it into the city manager, got everything approved, actually got it back approved, and procurement office told me I had to send it in as a council memo. So the time it took me to get it into a council memo from a procurement memo and get it back through the finance office and back through legal to have the contract approved. And it was just because it was a sole source contract from our EMS office, who's the only person who can provide it anyway. So this would definitely streamline our bids and our processes and save a lot of our staff time.
Okay. Council questions, because we do need to have opportunity for some council questions and feedback on this. Alderman Sage.
Just one quick question. I think in principle, I think these are all good things. What I think, John, what would help me is it appears that we have some further checks and balances that we're kind of trying to move forward with in our procurement process. Is there a way that we can kind of schematically represent that so that we can better understand that, because you allude to finance being involved with admin as well as legal being involved?
Yes.
Is there a way to kind of, a day in the life of a purchase order or whatever it is, just so that we can, because that's what I think our citizens expect, that there are checks and balances in there that make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to.
The answer is yes. I didn't want to overwhelm you with numbers because I've got a lot of numbers.
Right.
And
And that's
the
why I'm looking
answer is for a typical bid between the simple bid for 20 hours for our staff to complicated bid of 60 hours or more. And for every bid that, say, the police or fire does, their estimate is about 35 hours. For every procurement memo, you've got 5-6 hours of department time.
And I understand unit cost. I'm talking more about checks and balances in the procurement process.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
And I got lots of numbers.
I need pictures, man. I've got plenty of numbers, right?
Understood.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? Glad they're doing it by Alderwoman Schmidt. Okay. Alderman Lauer.
I'm just gonna add a little, flame to the fire here. I think we probably ought to look at transparency when we go about doing this. The public needs to understand exactly what we're doing and understand how that all happens, and I'm with, Alderman Sage in terms of how
Oh,
we go about
absolutely.
that. So,
And nothing happens without it being in the budget or having to go to council.
understand that, but we need to be able to make it crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Looks like we may actually have time to go to the bathroom before our regular meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn our special session?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Howman. Is there a second? Second. Second by Alderman Black. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. We're adjourned. We'll start in 8 minutes.